Welcome to the Holistic Health Habits podcast, where we dive into the art of nourishing the body, mind, and spirit through holistic nutrition. Today, we're speaking with Clayton Thomas, founder and CEO of the Root brand, a pioneer in the field of health and wellness, with a keen focus on detoxification, supplementation, and providing holistic solutions. The Root brand is committed to non-GMO, organic, and vegan products, emphasizing their mission to tackle health problems from the root. Clayton, thanks for joining the podcast.
Nice, Ronnie. Thanks for having me. Round one. Let's make this informational and entertaining.
Yes, let's do it. So just to start us off, I have heard of your brand. I've seen a little bit of it. It's done really well with, over the time that you launched. So just to start us off, can you tell us a little bit about your background, what led you to establish the Root brand and drive you to particularly focus on detoxification and clean supplementation?
So my journey, a lot of people get to start in, the educational component is like, okay, when they were in college, they figured some stuff out. My journey's been a little bit different. I've got approximately 45 years around integrative health and performance in humans and animals through growing up in a veterinary practice, highly integrated veterinary practice. So I was fortunate to be able to do, conversations and study mineral supplementation and looking at bacteria and fungus and viruses and parasites and fecal and blood samples when I was 8 years old, right? And going all the way through and being in, a tremendous amount of surgeries and many different kinds of animals and myself and for other people. And I've always, because of that environment, I've always had an innate understanding of, the passion to understand what's within us, right? And what we are. And that also ties into the spiritual aspect of understanding what we are. And I think in this world, it's really important to understand that the physical, the psychological, the spiritual, and the emotional are all connected, right? So if you're going to have an interest in this journey, you actually have to have an interest in all of it because it is all connected. And I think from a societal standpoint, we're beginning to understand that. But, so growing up, my dad taught me really early on that there are two things that impact the health of animals: diet and environment. And it's funny because those two things are the same thing that affect the human body. But what we looked at, for my entire childhood and pretty much all the way through college was the understanding that you have to change your diet, you have to change your lifestyle, you have to exercise, you have to do these things. It was all addition, right? You have to do this, do this, do this. And then about 20 years ago, after I was done with school and really started to dive into what I wanted to do, I had a colleague introduce me to a concept and a product that was just coming out. And I was one of the first people to get my hands on it. And it's the first time that God went and tapped me on the shoulder and said, follow this. And it was a concept of, taking nature's most powerful crystal and processing it to allow it to, clean up the body the same way it's been used for, centuries and millennia to clean up the environment. Yeah. And I had this insight that it's actually not addition that's the issue, it's addition by subtraction. That you can find better function by removing what's causing the problems. And then I started to dive into some of the published literature. And the first real studies I looked at were published in the 1970s by the World Health Organization. So it's a little bit before the chaos all started. And it was as a compilation of research and metadata done, from the 1950s to 1970 that showed that mercury alone was the primary cause of all chronic degenerative disease. And that then mercury's impact on the body, then it causes a cascade because mercury will disrupt every organ system of the body, do it differently in every individual. But then it also will magnify and exacerbate the effect of other environmental pollutants and other environmental chemicals. And if we look from 1970 to where we are now, the number of chemicals and pollutants and that have either been created, that are in the environment, that are in the air, the water, the soil, the food in us that have been passed down generationally, this is our sole issue, right? So the biggest thing that we have to focus on is how we clean that up, how we clean up the environment. But cleaning up the environment isn't the external environment. The most important thing to do and the most important thing every single person is responsible for is cleaning up their own environment. And so I had this journey over the last 19 years. And then about 9 years ago, I got introduced to Dr. Christina Ram on the phone. And that's where God went and tapped me on the shoulder the second time. And it was understanding that everything I wanted to do was going to be done by putting her in a position to allow her to do what she was created to do. And, she's a little bit of an anomaly. 20 years in biotech from Pfizer, Alexion, Biogen, IDAC, Johnson & Johnson, UCB, Bristol Myers Squibb, and Janssen, doing cloning, molecular design, mRNA research, fungus is cancer, former adjunct professor in oncology at Johns Hopkins, and, having 3 PhDs, a PsyD and EDD, and now postdoctoral certification in nanotechnology and bioscience engineering from Harvard, and 2 from Cornell in pharmaceutical management and nutritional counseling.
I know, she's got an amazing resume.
and you go, okay, that's not fair. And what she's been able to do is take everything that she'd done in biotech and apply that to nature. Because when she had a brain tumor and she had a spine tumor and she had access to everything that biotech had to offer, right? The highest level of research, the highest level of access you could get. And she was teaching on it. She was teaching the top oncologists in the country, how to do different things. But when it came down to taking care of herself and taking care of our kids, she went the other route. She figured out how to use nature and to, and the compounds that you find in nature, because God's created everything we need. You just have to figure it out when the right time comes, how to use it. And, through that journey, she's been able to create the solutions, knowing what the underlying problems were. And this is what's most important, of understanding the cascades in this biosphere. And you hear people talk about the microbiome, right? And they think the microbiome is just your gut. It's not. It's the entire operating system. It's from your head, from your brain to your heart to your gut, through your vagus nerve, and throughout all the connectivity of the entire operating system. That's your biome, your virome, your microbiome, the entire environment. And she understood, and she's lectured and worked with some of the top researchers in the world of understanding the impact of heavy metals and environmental toxins, how that will disrupt everything, as I mentioned, but then how the dysbiosis that's created from this toxicity will allow the proliferation of fungus. The proliferation of fungus is the biggest problem we're facing in humanity right now. The fungal issue then provides a breeding ground and basis for the proliferation and survival of different parasites, right? And our exposure to those, depending upon where you are in the world and what you do, especially here in the United States, is something that people haven't talked about. We know that our animals, our pets have, parasites. We deworm them, yet we don't deworm ourselves, and we live in the same environment and around our pets. But they're all connected. So you can't just say, oh, let's talk about parasites, when the parasite issue is not the issue. The parasite issue is a symptom of the toxicity and the fungal issues. So you have to address all of them. And, she knew, based on where she was, that 80+% of cancer diagnoses are actually incorrect. So if 80+% of those are wrong, what's the real issue? Well, it goes to those 3 things. So what we wanted to do then was allow her to create the solutions, which is what we now have with the Trinity and its siblings, that we have with Root, and then begin tracking it because of her work in biotech and understanding that, you have research registries to track outcomes. And if you can't track outcomes, you really don't know what you're doing and you can't prove it. Mm-hmm. And then working with practitioners or working with, our clients and customers of tracking their outcomes to show the efficacy and the data. And then with those case studies and case series, you can say, okay, in these instances, you have these outcomes. And if you do these protocols, you get these outcomes consistently. So that works. And it's the same thing that the pharmaceutical industry is required to do, 7 years, post data, once they release a drug. And it works. And then I built an algorithmic fintech ecosystem around what she was doing, because it's humanity that creates value for companies, and we just wanted to invest in people.
Okay. So when was that actually founded? It was 4 or 5 years ago?
Yep, February 2020. The best time ever to start a new company.
Well, I guess, people were getting into the health and wellness thing there, with nothing to do, sitting at home, trying not to put on weight.
It became important, right? People became interested in the concepts, and what we began to see from that was the ability to track outcomes. And Christina, from 2018 to 2020, was at Harvard, right? She was doing their nanotechnology and bioscience engineering program, and through that, and because she was at Bristol Myers Squibb 17, 18 years ago, working on the first mRNA vaccines with HIV. She knew all the data. She knew what was going on. And you have these 19, honestly, the smartest minds in the world, in their area, and they were all military, biotech, and research. And, listening to them talk of, one, you can't vaccinate into a live viral environment because you're going to create mutations like crazy. Almost sounded like it was intentional. But you also would never use these mRNA vaccines because while the concept of using mRNA is a phenomenal delivery system, the side effects that it creates are catastrophic. And well, now we live in an environment where we're dealing with the consequences of the choices of people that were uninformed. And I think from a humanity standpoint, the most important thing for people to understand is you are not just judged on your actions, you are judged on what you know. And if you have knowledge and you don't act, and especially as a human, if you don't act to do better for humanity, you will be judged. And I think that's where we sit now.
And your products, so they're labeled clean, non-GMO, vegan. Can you describe how you're able to achieve this and what makes that so significant in terms of differentiating from the rest of the market?
Well, the interesting aspect is not just the ingredients, right? And this is something that biotech's done for a long time, and people are starting to figure out, that we understand that we are light, that we are frequency, right? And different frequencies, whether it's the clothes you're wearing, you want to wear wool and you want to wear linen, because polyester and some of these others will actually suck the energy and suck the life out of you, literally. That you want to wear, high frequency fabrics because we emit energy. We have an aura. We have, our chakras, right? We know scientifically through all these different mechanisms that we emit energy. And, so you have to source the ingredients properly. You want them to be clean. And unfortunately, the term organic no longer has value because they changed the legislative language of the term organic in 2019. Now you can grow crops in their organic location. So if you grow crops in soil, that's considered organic, regardless of what you spray them with. That's insane, right?
Right.
But you have to source ingredients properly, right? So you have to find the highest quality because each ingredient has its own frequency. But then when you understand one sourcing and being uncompromising in quality, right? That's what's most important. And unfortunately, in the supplement world, I'll say 90% of that industry, quality is not a concern. It's about margins, it's about money, and the energy's all off. So once you're dedicated to finding the right sourcing of the right ingredients, then it comes down to how to bioscience engineer formulations that you can combine certain ingredients, you can combine compounds. If we looked at, say, black cumin seed oil, and you combine black cumin seed oil with turmeric and pure curcuminoids, and you added apple cider vinegar, and you added, resveratrol and D-ribose and a couple things, the combination of those will not only amplify one another, but you can create nano-emulsions, right? So you're actually creating nanotechnology using nature to create nano-emulsions as a delivery mechanism to allow those to be amplified and work more effectively. And then if you're singing, and if you're using intention, you're using love, and you're using harmonics and polarization and different mechanisms when you're creating these products, that you're going to have different outcomes than you would just by mixing things. And so that's what she's doing. If you want the secret sauce, it actually has nothing to do with ingredients. It has everything to do with who and what she is and what she's doing.
Is she singing in the lab?
Yes, she does. She actually sings.
What's her favorite song?
She channels, right? Okay. So it's the interesting part. So sometimes it's in tongues, sometimes she's got different things she'll sing. She'll, and the harmonics of humming, right, is so crucial because depending upon your spiritual basis, you actually understand the resonance of that, and what things come. So it's unique. It's the hard part of understanding. We want to make things simple. You want to look at a label and go, oh, these things are in it, so therefore, this and this and this. People want to ask questions. Why did you use this? Why did you use this? And a label, and this is important for people to understand in all aspects. What's on the label is not entirely what's been in and what's been put in the product. Even when you look at the pharmaceutical industry, or if you look at products on the shelf, they'll change language of ingredients. Like for high fructose corn syrup, but no one's going to put high fructose corn syrup on a label anymore because, well, everyone knows and consumers know it's bad. So what they do, they just change the name of it. It's maltodextrin. It's malt extract. It's all these different components that are the same thing, but they change the language of it. Yeah. Okay. So they put all these bad things in. So a lot of times, if you look at clean slate, we have to put on the label that it's silicon dioxide, right? Which it is, because silicon dioxide is a component of the clinoptilolate that we use, but the process that she's doing to fracture this amazing little crystal actually frees up the natural orthosilicic acid or bioavailable silica that's available in this crystal, and while keeping its cage structure. So you go, well, how is it silicon dioxide? I'm like, well, based on the process it's using, because it's fracturing this crystal that's made up of sodium aluminosilicate, we have to say that it's silicon dioxide, and that's how you put it on the label, but that's not really the whole story, right? But that's how you put it on the label. So you have to trust who's doing the work. You have to trust the company, and then you have to track the outcomes.
Okay, so yeah, it's the ingredients, but also the methodology, which I guess would be your proprietary in terms of what you'd be able to share. But what are some common toxic ingredients and common toxic methodologies that are in, very like widespread supplements that people use today?
Well, the one thing I think that is one of the most toxic that people have no idea about is vitamin C, right? 90% of the vitamin C products on the market are loaded with heavy metals, and that's kind of crazy. So all the vitamin C powders and people that are taking, most of those are loaded with different stuff. We could go down the list of different things.
Well, I'm always just a little bit wary of anything that's sweet or anything that's like made fun to eat, because it's kind of like, well, something went into that, and I steer clear a little bit of that. But I am someone who just looks at ingredients and prefers a shorter list when it comes to things, but obviously with education on whether it needs to have all the things. So.
Well, and that's probably one of the biggest things, right? If you look at a lot of the powders and different products on the market, if you look at like whey supplements or amino acid supplements or greens products, they are loaded with fillers, massive amounts of fillers that are completely unnecessary. So if you have a greens product and they say take a couple of scoops, you go, why do you need a couple scoops of greens? Because if it's done right, you only need like a teaspoon, right? If they're formulated correctly, like Relive Green. There's so many fillers to add all this bulk. All of that stuff is terrible for us. And you look at that, when you do that in volume on a regular basis, what are you putting in your body? What is that stuff doing? And why is it necessary? Well, they put it in there so it adds bulk and it looks like you're getting more. But if you understand the frequency aspect and the resonant component of the human body, you don't need volume, you need quality. Quality is going to give you, what your body really needs. You don't need to eat a lot. You need to eat well.
Yeah.
And that's really the key. So a lot of times, having the right ingredients, then it's like, okay, if you eat beef, you're like, okay, I want the purest, most healthy steak I can get. Or, and you don't want steak plus all of these things. It's like, well, the cow's been vaccinated and we gave it this and this and this and this, and there's all these other chemicals in there. Like, no, just give me a really good Wagyu steak that cow's been, well taken care of. Or when you're looking at vegetables, it's like, if you can grow them and you can control the environment, do that. If you can't, try to find the best sources possible.
Yeah, definitely. It's tough out there.
It is.
Sit through everything. But, now with consumers, they have an increasing awareness, around ingredient sourcing. And how does the Root brand not only ensure the purity and efficacy of the ingredients, but also connect consumers with the right information and evidence to support your claims? And how are you avoiding any labels of pseudoscience?
Well, and I think that goes twofold. One, our core principles are easy. So EASI, right? Education, authenticity, simplicity, and integrity. And, that's our functioning principles. And I think the most important aspect to that of what you're saying is education, right? So, and when it comes to the person that's creating the products, and this is the part that most people don't have access to, but we make readily available because she's the one doing a lot of the education, and she's the one behind it all, and she's up front and, in front of the room. So if you're making stuff in a chemical factory, a lot of the times the people that are doing the work, they're not going to be one that you want talking in front of people anyway. But with us, I mean, Christina's the formulator. Christina's the one that sources everything. She's the creator of all of it. And she's the one that's going to talk about, what she did and why she did it. I think I know before we had about 400 plus hours on YouTube. I know there's 300 plus hours on our YouTube channel, or on the combination of her YouTube channel and the Root YouTube channel. from an educational standpoint. So if you want a PhD in environmental toxicology and, learn from, honestly, and this is not just bragging, but truly one of the smartest people on the planet when it comes to this conversation, you should just dive into everything that she's talking about and then take that and apply it accordingly. Like we have some of our collaborating PharmDs. One of the PharmDs from Henry Ford Clinic up in Michigan, that was the person involved in bringing integrative medicine into the entire healthcare system. What Dr. Fadwa has stated, she's like, look, I've had to unlearn everything I learned over the last 20 plus years as a PharmD to start understanding what she's doing, because she's working on a level of quantum physics that no one even understood was capable yet. And that's what's really, really fun and really important, that you have influence of a true artist that's done things that have never been done before. She actually holds a patent on reversing aging, right? And that's already done. We've already proven that. She holds another patent on our clean spirits line that's now patented to improve alcohol metabolism in the liver. So you can actually take this stuff while you're drinking, and it will allow your liver to process alcohol faster, which means you take longer to get drunk, or your body's processing it quicker. You won't wake up with a hangover, and having the other adjuvants to support your body in recovery, either before you go to bed or when you wake up in the morning. No one's ever done these things before. So when you look at that, you go, well, maybe I should listen to her, right? Maybe I should, she's a woman. And I think that's one of the most important things in this world right now, that when it comes to guys and health and wellness, just turn it off, honestly. And I'm a guy. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time talking about this other than getting to promote what my wife has done. Because women are at the forefront now. We had an opportunity to destroy the environment. We did it, right? Society is kind of jacked up because it's run by men, and we're not good leaders, right? We're hunters. We're made to destroy stuff, and we do that, right? Women are creators, right? Yeah. And with the nurturing aspect that comes from it, but women are also warriors, right? You never want to get in a fight with a mama honey badger. Right. Right there. And that if you see a bear in the woods and you see their cubs, they're like, don't mess with the cubs, because you don't want to mess with mama.
Yeah.
And I think with that, as we see humanity start to change a little bit, because we're at this unique precipice, right? We're at this tipping point that we are energetically, physically, psychologically, we're at this point of ascension. Right, that we have an opportunity and all the tools of what's going on in this environment to give us an opportunity to become the best versions of ourselves, both physically, psychologically, and spiritually and mentally.
Yeah.
At the same time, we're in an extinction event. So I learned a long time ago that you never get to sit still. You see sharks. Sharks live a long time, right? Hundreds and hundreds of years typically. They never stop moving, right? So you're either growing or you're decaying. There is no standing still. And that's this point of where we are now. And we're all responsible for one.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, Christine, I think her background is super interesting, especially myself coming from a medical science background, biotech background. It's super interesting to see how she's been in that industry. And also, I think being in that industry and then realizing that a lot of the diseases that we have and that industry is trying to fix comes from the things we've been doing to our bodies. So we kind of have to figure out how to not keep adding things and just alleviate ourselves from all of that stress. So yeah, really interesting. And coming from that industry, there's the evidence, the clinical trials and things like that, which obviously I know that the health and wellness industry is a bit different with, resources to do that sort of thing. But are there studies connected to that? You mentioned she had patents and she had proven some things. So there are studies connected to the products that you have?
Absolutely. And that's where the research registries and tracking outcomes is really important, because you have, for the medical community or the scientific community, there's a couple different aspects of research that are scientifically valid. One, and people have heard about, double-blind or, clinical research studies. Mm-hmm. Problems with those is how easily manipulated the data can become.
Right.
And that's been a problem that's been known for, well, let me rephrase that. If you're in the room, in some of the stuff that's done behind the scenes, and you've negotiated with the FDA and you've negotiated with payers and you've been in the rooms in the C-suite of some of these pharmaceutical companies, and they spend hundreds of millions of dollars on research studies and development to get a drug approved, and then the data comes back and the data doesn't state what it needs to state in order to get that drug approved. And you know that, oh, well, you don't just scrap that, you just correct the data. And you go, well, wait a minute, that's not an ideal mechanism. And that doesn't happen across the board with everything, but it does happen. So you have to really look at a lot of those, and you go, okay, one, who paid for them? What was the desired outcome that was being paid for? Was it done independently? And there's many aspects. The other side is case studies and case series, right? And this is the part that I learned from my dad in veterinary medicine, because there's, in the animal side, it's either going to work or it's not going to work. There's no placebo effect in animals, right? So, and I'll give an instance of when my dad started using Chinese medicine and Chinese herbs. And he had a master herbalist come into the office that was teaching him how to do, specific blends, for specific instances. And he asked a real simple question. He's like, why do you do this in this instance? And the herbalist looked at him and said, because my grandfather's grandfather's grandfather did it that way and it still works. And there's 1,000 years of data that is showing that doing this gets this. Those are all case studies, and it's created a case series that if you have specific protocols and you're tracking the outcomes, right? So maybe you're looking at blood work, maybe you're doing other measurements, you're looking at the person itself and what they're doing, and based on this specific protocol, you get these outcomes. And maybe you get that in one instance, and then you do that same protocol with another individual, and you get the same outcome. So then you start putting together a case series. All of that is publishable. All of that, I will argue, is more valuable than the other type of research, because you're actually seeing things happen in specific cases and know that. I'll use autism as an example, right? Where if you follow a protocol, and we'll just say clean slate, 0 in, restore, and you have kids that are in the spectrum, since the age of like 18 months to 2 years, and a lot of them have had developmental issues over, the time that they've been here, whether you have a 7-year-old or a 16-year-old, maybe they've been nonverbal. And maybe they follow a protocol, and after 60, 90 days, they start talking again and they're normal. And you go, well, one instance is interesting. So you follow that case, you document that case, and then when you get a dozen of them and you put those together and you go, okay, they've all done this protocol and these are the outcomes we're getting and all of these. That's statistically significant and it's scientifically significant. And that process is not something that is just what we do. And because of, Christina's focus on tracking outcomes and knowing that you have to show what's working. But this is what everyone should be doing, right? This is what every company should be doing, and they don't, right? But as we go forward, especially when we look at, becoming a practitioner or learning this space and how you can work in this space, tracking your outcomes of your patients is the most important thing you can do, because then you remove hyperbole, right? I don't have to say, oh, our products are great and they're phenomenal and you should try them. No, I can say, look, if you've got vaccine injury from, the COVID vaccines, what Dr. Norbert Keshkesh has proven 3.5 years ago in elite athletes that had, these injuries, and after a couple weeks of getting the required 2 shots that they got, their pro-BNP markers went through the roof 3 times the normal, which is the heart marker for cardiac inflammation. Their C-reactive protein markers went through the roof. Their AST and ALT markers for liver inflammation went through the roof. And they couldn't breathe. They couldn't exercise anymore. They couldn't really function. They were showing all the signs of, bad things coming. And he started them on a specific protocol, tracked them, and after 30 days of having all their blood work, redid their blood work, and they were normal. They were able to go back to exercise. They didn't have these. And if we make that claim, you go, you can't claim that. But if the data shows it, right, and it's not one instance, it's multiple instances that he's been able to present scientifically and say, these are the cases, this is what we had, this is what we saw, this is what we did, these are the outcomes. That's the most scientifically significant you can get. And when you have those are what's presentable, especially when you live or work in an environment where you're not allowed to make claims. You don't ever want to make claims. What you want to do is talk about the science, talk about the outcomes, because that's the only thing that matters. People really don't care about the ingredients. They don't care about how it's made. If they did, they'd be doing more research, right? And they don't. We don't care. We want to know that the grass is green on both sides, and we'll eat it. What we care about are the outcomes, right? And if you have something and the person that did it understands what they're doing, it's clean, it's safe, it's efficacious, and then you look at the outcomes and go, wow, this is doing this and this and this, and it's helping all these people, then you're good.
Yeah. Yeah, there definitely is a power to anecdotal evidence, which doesn't translate to anything a lot of the time with the big clinical trials, that had to be statistically powered. But definitely, physicians, wellness practitioners, there's a use for that for sure.
Yeah. Well, and the same thing in the pharmaceutical industry, because the pharmaceutical industry is required to do 7-year post-marketing registries. So they'll do the double-blind placebo-controlled studies to study the molecule that they're doing. So they have that. But once they put the product in the market, they have to track outcomes for 7 years because they don't know what those things do in the clinical trial, what they do in people, right? We're in the midst of that environment right now, right? Over the last 3.5 years, roughly 4 years now, right? They had a concept. They said, oh, we need to do this. And scientifically, it was not a good idea, right? So we know that now. But now they're looking at the outcomes and going, wow, statistically, why did we have an increase in overall death and a decrease in, average mortality rate across the globe in the last 4 years? That doesn't look good. What happened? Right? So you have to do that. It doesn't matter if it's Viagra, if it's Lipitor, if it's a vaccine for something, an oncology medication. They have to track that data because that's where the real value comes in. The goal is being able to create things that going in, because they're all naturally derived, you don't have the negative side effects, right? You don't run the risk of a lot of those things if they're done properly, if they're sourced properly, if they're formulated properly. Because you can use natural components from different plants and different things, and you can hurt people just as much as a black boxed pharmaceutical can. So you have to have that knowledge and that experience and understanding. And when you put them all together, then regardless of what side you're on, and both Christina and I both understand the benefits of the pharmaceutical and biotech space, as well as what you can call the integrative space. They're not diametrically opposed. They should both be available, but they both have use, right? You shouldn't use a lot of, the pharmaceutical space as a first option. Yeah. It should be secondary when needed. And, unfortunately here in the United States, it's not been our business model.
100% agree. And I guess, the holistic health industry is rapidly evolving, and there are a lot of doctors, nutritionists, dietitians. I think I'm in the algorithm for sure with a lot of stuff out there, new research findings, sparking new trends. Are there any emerging trends that you're particularly excited about based on growing research? And also on that, what are some of the more dangerous ideologies and trends not backed by any legitimate evidence that you're seeing?
No, I think let me make sure I word this properly. The access to information and the access to content is one of the best things and one of the most dangerous things simultaneously. And I'm not just talking about artificial intelligence, right? It's the use of TikTok, it's the use of Instagram, it's the use of YouTube, where you have people that want to come out and it's like, I'm an expert because I'm a biologist. I did this and I found this one thing. And if you do this one thing, then you're going to get better from all of these things. And that's bullshit.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, one of the most dangerous things. And if you it's the hard part, because if you listen to a lot of people talk and you actually know, right, you have knowledge of this, you listen to a lot of these new influencers talk, they're not using correct information. They're actually speaking incorrectly, but they're doing it eloquently. Or they have a marketing machine behind them that's pushing a narrative so they can sell different things. And over time, you're going to screw people up. And I think that's one of the things that's really important. And so what we see going forward, the understanding of the biosphere and understanding that we are not a teeter-totter, right? So when you want to find homeostasis, balance is not like this, right? We think, and you hear this on social media, it's like, if you're imbalanced, if you have an MTHFR, gene that's expressing that it's off, you have these issues. No, you're actually mercury toxic, because if you know the real data, mercury shuts off methylation. So, and if you didn't have the ability to methylate when you were conceived, you would have been aborted. You wouldn't have been born because you're broken. But if you understand the environmental components, going back to what we talked about initially, that these are the things that genetic expression is the most important component to this, not your genetics, right? but you need to understand your genetics because there's so much you can interpret in this. And we spent a year developing a full genetic panel that gives people what we call the book of you. And it's about that thick. It's about 2.5 inches thick of data on you, how you should eat, how you should exercise, how you metabolize cannabis, how you metabolize CBD. Should you be using them? Can they benefit you? Do they cause anxiety? Could they cause other problems? How you should exercise. Are you one that, benefits from cardiovascular work? Do you need to be on a treadmill or do you not? Are you intrinsically motivated to exercise or do you not need to have somebody with you? Right. So you get an idea. But when it comes down to the key aspects of genetics, it's not about your genetics. It's about your genetic expression. Right. So it's about epigenetics. Right? Because you can turn genes on and off based on your lifestyle and your environment. So when you start to do those things and then understanding what NAD is, right? And understanding our metabolic pathways. And these are all things that Christina has understood innately and has created mechanisms to go in the mix with what now we have as Sculpt. And most people have heard of Ozempic or they heard of Wegovy or they heard of semaglutide. And that hits on one genetic pathway, GLP-1, to make you feel full, right? To create satiety while also paralyzing your stomach, which is catastrophic over an extended period of time because it causes death. She actually took a year to develop a mechanism that hits on 5 separate genetic pathways, all simultaneously, all naturally with no negative side effects that allows your body to start using insulin effectively while blocking sugar and improving metabolic function. You go, and pharma could never do that because they could never put 5 pathways together in one thing because it would be catastrophic to do it synthetically. The body would just go, I'm done. Mm-hmm. But when done naturally, when taking specific components from different parts of the world and sourcing them correctly and then combining them, say, okay, if we use this one and use this one, it's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 + 1 = 100. And then understanding those components. And then when you get into NAD, and so if you want to lose weight and you want to function better, you've got to improve insulin management. And it's not just about being insulin resistant, because if you're already in good shape and then you're regulating insulin management, proper insulin management will allow IGF-1 to work effectively, which means you start to build lean mass, right? Because you don't want to be skinny fat. You want to have good muscle, so you're functional, but at the same time, be lean and then be able to process sugar effectively. But when you start doing that, you want to convert white fat to brown fat, right? You hear that talked about as brown fat is burnt to create energy. Well, what's the difference between white fat and brown fat? It's actually mitochondrial function. The mitochondria doesn't have the energy in white fat to be burnt. So what is that? That's actually an NAD issue, which goes back to the environmental components. And she created Immune Defense Shield, which was the first supplement actually stabilized for over 60 days that you could put the cofactors to natural endogenous NAD production in a capsule that could last up to 2 years. So when you take that in conjunction with these things, you're boosting your body's ability to produce NAD, which the higher levels of NAD create longevity because the mitochondria need energy. If you have more energy, you live longer, the same way that filling your car up with fuel instead of running it on a 1/16 of a tank is going to allow the car to run longer. This is scientifically not difficult. And she's done that. So being able to allow your body to convert white fat into brown fat, improve these metabolic pathways, it's insane. But we already know these things. Now we're trying to educate the population on, hey, this is something that's better than spending $1,500 a month and killing yourself so you can get skinny.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we have like one more question, if you have time, just for the one last question, just for practical tips for our listeners. They're keen on integrating more holistic practices into their daily lives. What would your top recommendation be for starting a toxin-free life, perhaps without any supplements? And then what would be your go-to within your product range?
Start with clean slate. And if you're not going to start with anything that's going to assist your body in that, one, you're going to have a hard time doing it because you got to send in little green garbage trucks to clean up the mess because your body's not capable of doing it on its own. I'm not vegan. I don't agree with a vegan lifestyle. I'm big on understanding your genetics, understanding your blood type, and eating accordingly. So that could be like if you're an A blood type, you're made to be vegetarian, right? I'm an O. I need meat, I need fat, and I need some veggies and pineapple, and I'm good, right? I'm not supposed to eat potatoes. I'm not supposed to eat tomatoes. I don't need nightshades because they're not good for me. And I know that because I've studied myself and read up on it. But you really have to get to know yourself, I think, before, and that's what's most important. You can look at eating clean as much as possible. Drink as clean a water as you can get, which is so crucial. You need different filtration because you're not going to get it. I don't know if you saw what happened to Avion a couple weeks ago, that they had to destroy over 2 million bottles from one of their wells, their springs, because it was loaded with E. coli. You know how freakish that is, that in the mountains of France now they have E. coli in the deep wells that they're pulling water out of. You go, oh no, this is not good.
Right.
Yeah. So you really, that's, foundationally, and clean slate is so important on two aspects. And this is how you understand what we are spiritually, that there was intelligent design in creating us. The planet around us, our ecosystem that we live around, is 70% water, 17% silica, and a mixture of other components that makes up the world around us. The human body consists of 70% water, 17% silica, and a mixture of other components that make us up. We are the world that we exist in, right? We are just a phenomenal biological computer that's created from those ingredients, the same way that we've made computers from the same stuff. And it's the silica, it's that 17% that's so crucial. Right? We need more bioavailable silica to allow these microprocessors in this amazing operating system to function at a higher level. That's what Clean Slate is providing, on top of a mechanism to start removing the bad stuff, which allows the body to start doing the things it's made to do. And that's what I would do.
Okay, great. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. This has been super insightful, Clayton. I'm learning about the origins of the Root brand and its championing of detox and purity when it comes to health and wellness. So thank you for giving up your time and sharing your valuable expertise today. And to everyone listening, definitely go and explore the Root brand's range of products and to participate in their community platform for more personalized wellness guidance. We plan to continue this exploration of holistic health habits through the lens of holistic nutrition. So if you like this episode, remember to follow and subscribe, and share this podcast with your friends and family, just like Clayton's going to do.
That's right.
We'll see you next time on Holistic Health Habits. And until then, remember to stay connected, educated, and nourished on your journey to holistic health.